course, my work, and it's interesting the perspective, the perception of my work. When I was studying drugs, illegal drugs, people don't ask questions in the criminology department. It's normal, okay. And then I changed already when I was doing my PhD. I decided I want to move to environmental issues, rainforest mainly, which was my interest. And I thought, okay, I'm going to stay at the university. But then one day I thought, oh wait, a lot of this logging is illegal actually, especially in the tropics. I had traveled already in different countries, and I thought, oh, if I focus on illegal logging, and then I can stay within the criminology department, I can just keep on doing that, especially after my PhD. And so in 2001 I started with a class, criminology class on illegal logging and deforestation. And it was interesting how people looked at me, the students and my colleagues, in my department also other colleagues. You know. Yes, Tim has started, he's studying timber now and forests. You know, people thought I'd become a tree hugger. And yes, he's studying animals and forests. It's something soft, you know. Drugs is hard crime, and the idea is, and of course no drug deals, there's no violence involved. But okay. And now he's turned to a soft theme, but it is not totally, of course, as I will show, untrue. It's not at all a soft crime or something. It's I think there's, if you talk about deforestation or logging and more generally deforestation, there's a lot of violence involved. It's a pretty violent sector actually. But it's interesting now, looking back, how the perception of this theme has changed. Maybe you read about it a few months ago in September. There was a report came out by Interpol and UNEP, United Nations Environmental Program, about logging and deforestation. Just a press release. That the illegal timber trade by organized crime groups is estimated to be between 30 billion and 100 billion US dollars. So it's a multi-billion illegal industry, and well, I think it's interesting. It's finally, in a way, finally recognized. This is indeed a large illegal sector, and it's also the report highlights 30 key methods used by organized crime groups. But the way they obtain false permits, concessions, or sometimes even hacking websites. Maybe just how this works, how professional it sometimes is. In Brazil, it was in 2008, more than, there has been a court case now, but more than 100 logging companies have been brought to court in Brazil because they were using hackers to log into the governmental website system. Because the government is in a way to control the timber business. They thought, okay, let's have a website, and then every company has to log in on the website so we can check. We can control the timber business. But then what did the timber business entrepreneurs do? Using hackers, they broke into the computer system of the government, and then they basically, well, they made illegal timber legal on paper. And we're talking about, I forgot the numbers, but I mean, it was millions of cubic meters. So this showed how professional it is sometimes using hackers to legalize illegal timber. Now, so I started this about 12 years ago, already working on this on timber. So I show you some pictures also of my research. So what you see here is one of my first field trips. This is in Borneo. Borneo is a country, well, in Southeast Asia. Most part of Borneo is Indonesian, but the northern part is Malaysia, eastern Malaysia, and there is Brunei, the Sultanate of Brunei, little part of it. So this is a national park in Indonesia, near the Malaysian border, in the heart of Borneo. No, it's a national park, so nobody is allowed to log here. So this is illegal logging, because nobody is allowed to cut a big tree. And then talking about illegal logging, especially when law enforcers often think, oh, illegal logging, that is CITES. CITES is the convention on the internet in which protected animals and trees, plants are listed. And if you want to trade an animal or tree or timber species from CITES, you need a special permit. Suppose you want to import a tiger or a protected species, then you need a special permit. Same for timber species. And so, if you have importing a timber species from CITES, you don't have the right permits or the false permits, it's clear that it's illegal. However, the CITES is just one small part of the illegal timber business. Most of what we say illegal logging, concerns this species, tree species, it's Moranti, is not protected. But here the practice of the cutting is illegal. And so if you're talking about illegal logging in general, most cases it concerns non-protected species that are logged illegally. And well, especially if you're doing field work like I do. So I show some pictures of Indonesia and mostly of the Brazilian Amazon, where I've been spent about more than half of my time over the last 3 years. I'm back in Europe now, but I've spent a lot in the Amazon. So I'll show some pictures of that. Especially going there, and then you realize the high profits. And it's something that's very much underestimated. Well, it's recognized now in these reports, but the profits are so huge, especially in source countries. You know, for example, a logo. This timber is a cubic meter is sold between 10 and 20, 10 euros a cubic meter in this part. It's very cheap, and you can sell this internationally, maybe easily for 200 euros a cubic meter. And especially because when it's illegal, the profits are so high. And if we look in the European market, and we're walking in here, of course, we see this beautiful, if you notice it, this beautiful tropical timber just right everywhere. It's beautiful. And now, since I study this, I always look differently at buildings, also walking into this building, so okay. I'm not as good yet with timber, I'd like to, that I can immediately see what kind of timber it is, but I know it's tropical timber, so I always wonder, okay, where does it come from? And I know the Dutch market quite well. The Dutch market, they said, oh, but we have now certification, certified timber. I said, yes, that's true. And then there's the best one, FSC. It has a market share of 20% in the Netherlands. The illegal logging is still about 50%, so there's much more illegal logging, illegal logs, illegal timber on the market than certified. And of course, and illegal logs, illegal timber is often cheaper, of course, because they haven't paid taxes and all that. And so it's also from a way it's not for it's not good for the legal timber. And of course, people who make choices who say, oh, well, this one is cheaper. I said, yes. Probably illegal. Sometimes you can buy a nice set, a garden table with some 3 or 4 chairs for £100. It's hard that that is illegal, probably, because for that price, and I think sometimes with stolen goods, if you can buy an iPod for £10, you think, it's probably stolen. But we don't have the consciousness yet. Well, a nice table set for your garden, tropical hardwood, for £100 is probably illegal. We still have to go to get to that consciousness that there's a lot of illegality involved in our shops. But okay, let's now have a little look at some source countries. And so this is the national park. And just to show some old, this is the south of southern Borneo, just to show how quickly. In the 1990s, Indonesia was the place where deforestation was faster than anywhere. It had the highest deforestation rates of tropical countries. And the lowlands were low because it's easier accessible than in the mountains, were logged at a very high speed. And just to give you an idea, so this is, you see here that, and this is also happens also to be a main orangutan area, till these lowlands here were just logged in a few years. Now, this is a border area, Putu Sibau, which is in the interior of Borneo, again near the border of Malaysia. And at the time I was there, this was about 2005 or 2006. I was there for a few weeks. Because there was so much timber smuggling going on. Illegal logging in the national park and being smuggled to Malaysia, just 30 kilometers further. And a few hundred trucks a day were transporting timber. And because all these heavy trucks were loaded with timber, it made the roads really bad. So this is the public transport, and people have to push the bus because of, well, basically because of the roads are so bad due to all the trucks with logs. So here you find a national park, and there's guys from the villages, they're making some easy money, cutting trees, sawing them in the forest already, and then with bicycles, they walk them to the road. Basically they have all these platforms with wood on the floor, and then they walk with their bike, and then they have metal chains on their bike, so they put the one log one by one, or the beams, one by one they bring them to the road, and here the trucks come, and then everybody loads them in the trucks, and they drive to Malaysia, only half an hour away from here. And then I've been traveling in this region for a week, and I've not seen one law enforcement officer or something. It's all this whole area that's all about illegal practices, basically. Well, illegal timber extraction. And the closer you get to the border with Malaysia, the higher the powers. And well, you know, mountains, hills are being cut, stripped, literally. Now, this is a picture I didn't take myself. I'm at an NGO there with academics, specializing in forestry, and this is an illegal sawmill. Indonesia was very well aware of all this illegal logging, and it was a lot of it going to Malaysia. Interestingly, if you study statistics, Malaysia has always, for years, one of the highest export rates of tropical timber. Some years, Malaysia exports, now many years, Malaysia exports more timber than Indonesia, whereas if you look at the size, Indonesia is much bigger. Or sometimes Malaysia exports more timber than Brazil, which is, and then you think, well, Malaysia still has a lot of forests, so where does all the timber come from? Well, basically it comes from Indonesia. And this is known, that the statistics are not, you cannot trust them, that a lot of the statistics hide actually illegal logging and smuggling from, well, timber from Indonesia. And this is one of the ways. The Indonesian government was aware, okay, we have a lot of illegal timber, so there was an export ban on round logs, because all these round logs were disappearing, and so it was illegal to export round logs. So the Indonesian government thought, okay, we can easily recognize a round log. So if you want to export timber, you have to pass through a sawmill, and we, as the government, can control sawmills. But what happens, so you could only export sawn timber, you get illegal sawmills. So this is an illegal sawmill, and so in the interior of Borneo, along the border, you have a lot of these illegal sawmills. Now, Indonesian environmentalists, environmental protectors that I've met, they go into these camps with hidden camera, they'll hide themselves as either food sellers or t-shirt sellers, and they take the pictures of these sawmills. So this is another picture of them. These sawmills also have small zoos, because, I mean, this is what they catch as well. I mean, they're doing it for the timber, but okay, if you see a baby orangutan or a monkey or a bear, then you take them because it's, you can sell them, and that's what they do, they sell them. This is still the same area. This is another smuggling route. This is a big lake, and behind, there's some mountains here, and behind there is Malaysia. So that's why I looked as well. So you see a small village here on the lake. It's all about smuggling. So wherever you look, whichever direction you look, it was all about smuggling. And well, now this is back in the village. There was this new police chief. I mean, this is very remote, in the heart of Borneo. It's a little town. This is the police station. And there was a new chief of police because his predecessor had been fired for being involved in illegal logging. Now he was here and he arrested Malaysians being involved in illegal logging. And you can see they're not really small guys, but it's quite professional. This is all Malaysian equipment seized in Indonesia, in a national park. Took them actually 2 days to get all these equipment at the police station. And so this is all Malaysian. This is again the car park of the police. Malaysian trucks. Easy to see because it's in Malaysia. They drive just like in England on the other side and in Europe. So you can see where the steering wheel is. It's Indonesian or Malaysian. So it's all Malaysian. This is the new police chief showing to me what he intercepted. But then I asked him, so what illegal logging is still going on? I mean, you just saw the pictures, you know? And then so I asked him, yes, well, he said he didn't have four-wheel drives to go to the forest. Whereas, well, this parking lot was full of it. But later on, I heard from people from Telapak and EIA, which we have later. EIA, the Environmental Investigation Agency, works with in Indonesia with a really good NGO, Telapak. And they told me, they checked him out, and they said, well, he was involved in illegal logging too. So what probably happened is that he arrested some competitors, because well, there's a tense relationship between Malaysia and Indonesia, so he probably arrested some competitors and to have a lot to control the business better. But the EIA, which also did research in the same time around 2006, more, but in Papua, on the island of New Guinea, where there was because all the timber used for this was Meranti timber. It's very popular for window frames in Europe. But EIA was doing a research in Papua, and the Indonesian president was shocked after reading this report, and he sent new army troops to stop other army troops in being involved in illegal logging. My research also had some effect, because by accident I was at the reception of the Dutch Queen's Day in Jakarta, in the capital, and then I was introduced to the anti-corruption advisor of the Indonesian president. And the Indonesian president is really concerned about this. He really is trying to do something about it. But the problem is that the army, the police, but even more so, the army is involved in illegal logging. And the army has a lot of logging companies, actually. It is military companies, kind of state companies. Because in Indonesia, the army has to earn part of its salary. It's only part of the total army budget is paid by the national state. They have to earn their own money. So the army has a lot of timber companies. Of course, this is complicated. But anyway, he's really trying to do something on illegal logging. And I met this presidential advisor, and I don't know how much effect I had, but anyway, a year later, for sure I know the studies from the EIA, it was illegal logging dropped considerably in Indonesia, because it had the highest illegal deforestation rate in the world. About 80 to 90% of all logging deforestation was illegal in the late 1990s, and in 2006 it dropped to 40%, with only 40% of all the logging being illegal. Still substantial, of course, but for a tropical country it's quite normal that most of the logging, I mean, there was last year a new report by the World Bank came out also on logging, and if you read these percentages, it's very normal for tropical countries especially that more than half of all logging is illegal. And so in Indonesia it dropped to 40%. Now, of course, before going to the Amazon, I've been in many villages, and of course there's really a discussion even in villages about this logging, and there's conflicts also between villages on this logging issue, because obviously a lot of young people, young guys, get working for a timber baron. So some of them, because the guy here in the area, everybody knows, it's a Malaysian timber baron. He's quite known. He's a very rich man, and he's seen a little bit as a helper, as a Robin Hood in the area, because he offers work. This is a very remote, peripheral area of Indonesia, and not much work. And then this Malaysian comes, and he offers work to a lot of people. So a lot of people are happy because but it leads to discussions too, because, for example, what happens a lot with all this timber extraction, you need trucks, and trucks need roads. And what they do often is that there's streams, of course, in rainforest, a lot of water and a lot of streams, and so the truck has to pass by. There's no bridges, so sometimes they just throw sand and earth into a stream so the truck can pass. But it means that streams are blocked, and the village downstream don't get fresh water anymore. And water, well, people have to mostly drinking water or to take a bath in the streams, and so water gets polluted. People don't have clean water anymore. And well, if you don't have clean water, I mean, you have a serious problem. So this leads to conflicts. And the deforestation, of course, leads to less animals to hunt, leads to less fruit or medicinal trees. So of course, it's short-term money, it's quick money for some, but on the longer term, but you cannot generalize on it. In some villages, okay, the village leader works with the loggers, he accepted money from the loggers, and then he allows them to log in some community forest. But in another community, the village head or the community is very much against it, because they said, we need this forest to live, our ancestors have always lived there, we need it to hunt and to do everything. So they don't. So there's really not one You cannot say it's, you know, the locals always work together or locals are against it. No, it's a very mixed picture. And it leads again to conflicts between villages. Sometimes one village will make a lot of money and the village downstream suffers from it. Now, let's now go to Indonesia, to Brazil and the Amazon, where I've been over the last 3 years, mainly. So this is the area of the Amazon rainforest, 40% of South America, the largest tropical rainforest on the planet, and this whole, and this is the largest freshwater system on the planet. It's about 15 to 20% of all the fresh water that flows into the ocean. It's the Amazon River. In terms of water, there's a scientific discussion which river is the longest on the planet, the Nile or the Amazon River. According to Brazilian scientists, the Amazon is longer than the Nile. But in terms of water flow, there's no discussion. It's so enormous that the water that flows into the ocean, it's the same amount of water as the second till the seventh river combined. So it's huge. And there's a dry season and a wet season, and it in Manaus, this is the big city in the Amazon. It's about 1,500 kilometers. Manaus is right here. Maybe you've heard of it. And between the dry and the wet season, it's over 10 meters difference in the river. You know, the ocean ships come here, container ships. There's actually an industrial city right here in the Amazon. An industrial, you know, they're making computers, motorcycles, whatever. All these factories right here, and ships, container ships can just go up to the river and export it. So it's if you go in the harbor, it's these huge differences. Now, the main reason, I mean, we talk about logging, but of course logging for timber is a cause of deforestation, but generally speaking in the Amazon, it's basically, this is the main cause of deforestation. Logging for cattle. And cattle, clearing forest for cattle ranges has been the main cause of deforestation, but 70% of all the deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon is for cattle. And Brazil is now the largest beef producer and exporter of the world, has surpassed the United States. There's actually more cows than people in Brazil. And there's almost 200 million people, and there's over 200 million cows now in Brazil. And it has especially increased in the Amazon over the last 20 years or so. And in the Amazon now, in the Brazilian Amazon, it's about 25 million people living, and more than 70 million cows. So many more, 3 times more cows than people in the Brazilian Amazon. And here you can see, you know, Amazon rainforest and farmland for cows. So this is a pretty common picture to see cows in the Amazon. Of course, they're not from there. They're originally from, most of them are from India. And there's a lot of conflicts. I don't know if you know who this is. This is Chico Mendes, a rubber tapper who was killed in the late 80s and who became the first symbol as an environmental protector. And he became an icon for the protection of the Amazon rainforest. So he was a rubber tapper from the Western Amazon, and he was killed by the son of a ranger, of a farmer. And this is quite typical because there is a natural conflict in the Amazon between farmers and rubber tappers, because you know how much you know about rubber, but you know rubber comes from the rubber tree, and you have to tap it every day. And so a rubber tapper makes its rounds every day and takes a little bit of rubber, the liquid from the tree. And in the Amazon, there are no large rubber plantations. So the trees are found scattered in the rainforest. So a rubber tapper is automatically wants to preserve the rainforest, because he knows that it doesn't work, a rubber plantation, because of the fungus and because of insects. Because people have tried it, but it doesn't work. So it only works, one of the reasons is that the soil in the Amazon is very poor as compared to, for example, other rainforests in Africa or in Indonesia. So trees have to compete with each other. And a tree wants its species, when it's reproducing, to be as far as possible, so they're not competing for the same nutrition. So he was a rubber tapper, and he was organizing rubber tappers in unions, and this led to a conflict with the farmers, and farmers often form kind of coalitions, also often with loggers until today, and who see environmental protectors or forest community leaders as a threat. And it's very common that people are being threatened and are being killed. So he is a very known example. Chico Mendes in the late 80s. And this is another high-profile victim of, this is Sister Dorothy in the United States. She's very known. She was an American sister, 73-year-old. She was killed in 2005, also in the Brazilian Amazon. And she was trying to preserve the rainforest and the poor forest communities, and she was receiving death threats from loggers and farmers for a long time, but eventually was killed in 2007, and especially 2005, sorry. In the United States, this led to a lot of attention, and still, you can find a lot about her, also the court cases, very complicated, and people are being prosecuted. Also, the big one important reason being is that it's getting so much international attention, because there are literally hundreds of people are being killed every year in Brazil in the forest as related to land issues, but these don't get any attention, and there's hundreds of people under threat right now in the Brazilian Amazon, threats by loggers and farmers, and they usually don't lead to court cases. The government doesn't really look at it, but only a few cases, these high-profile cases that get international attention, yes, then there are court cases. Now these were the Da Silvas, a couple, the most prominent rainforest protectors over the last years, and they were killed both together in 2 years ago, on the very same day that the Brazilian House of Representatives adopted a new law to allow, actually, the new Forest Act to allow for more deforestation. On that very same day they were killed. He gave, a few months earlier, he gave a TED lecture, and he said, in Brazil, he said, well, I'm talking to you here today, but maybe in a few months I'm not here anymore because I'm receiving death threats. Well, it really did happen. He was killed a few months later. So they were very prominent rainforest protectors, and well, also here the government, the president, the Brazilian president, she talked about it, and she said there will be a process and all that, because they're so high profile, very known environmentalists, but they were also killed. They were receiving death threats for a long time, but they didn't get any police protection, and well, they're one of the many victims. But again, there are two good NGOs in Brazil that are reporting on land issues. There's one that's called CIMI, the Indigenous Council on, what's called Indigenous Council. They bring out a report of violence against indigenous communities in Brazil, and it's really a book with very detailed stories about all these conflicts, and people are threatened and killed, mostly by farmers and loggers or miners, over land issues, mainly in the Amazon. And there's another NGO, it's called, connected to the Catholic Church, it's called the Pastoral Land Commission, also publishing a yearly report about land conflicts and violence and victims. And both reports show there's really so many people being killed, and it's getting not much attention, not in the news media or not much by the public prosecutor's offices, and the police. So this is a quite normal thing to do, and these are only the known cases of victims. So, well, again, go back to I want to zoom in a little bit of an area where I do a lot of research now, which is right here. And Brazil has 9 states in the Brazilian Amazon. You know, so this is all the Brazilian Amazon. There's different states, but there's 2 main ones here, large ones. And I do research in this state here. It's called Pará. And of all the states in the Brazilian Amazon, this is the one that exports most timber, and it's also the state that is known for its violence, and it's called the state of conflict. And Sister Dorothy, the American nun, she was killed in the south of Pará, and she's right here. Maybe just for your information, so there is, and Chico Mendes was killed here in the western Amazon, right here somewhere. So there's cattle, there's timber, And a new development is soy. It has become basically the second cause of deforestation, soy. Soy is basically for cattle food. And the main soy producing area of Brazil is right here in the southern Amazon. But as you can see, it's and this is all exported, most of the soy, to Europe and Asia mainly. But it's landlocked, as you can see. It's far from the ocean. So what happened, all this soy was going south to Sao Paulo, approximately here, 3,000 kilometers, which has, obviously a lot of transport costs. So now what happened, in 2003, Cargill, which is the biggest soy company in the world, built a soy export harbor right here on the Amazon River. Here's the Amazon River. In a town, a city called Santarém, which we will go after, in order to reduce transport costs. So a lot of and this is also a very important timber export harbor. Now, the soy that's produced in this area now only has to travel 1,000 kilometers north, and from there on it can be exported directly to Europe. Rotterdam being the main destination. And so just give talk in Holland, and people don't know that all the pigs and the chickens in the Netherlands eat soy from Brazil. Now this is the state, Pará. Sister Dorothy was killed in the south, and it's called Mato Grosso, is the state south, which is the main soy producing state, and it's called the frontier, the agriculture frontier in Brazil. And the pillar of the economy in Brazil is agriculture. It's biggest beef exporter now, biggest soy exporter now of the world, and Brazil's future, it's an emerging economy. They say, it's the agriculture is really the basis of the economy, and it has a very strong lobby. And so the soy frontier is moving north from the southern Amazon into the heart of the Amazon, which is here. Now, here, Santarém, this is 900 kilometers still to the river mouth, here near Berlin. And the soy frontier is moving northwards. That's why Sister Dorothy, she was killed in the south. She's part of that moving frontier to the north. And this frontier is violent because these farmers from other parts of Brazil, from the south mainly, they're going to the Amazon because it says cheap land, and especially in this state, okay, you can easily log illegally, you can bribe officials, or otherwise you simply threaten them. So there's this violent frontier moving deforestation and agricultural development. And it has arrived now here in Santarém because of this harbor has arrived here. And it has brought loggers and farmers from other parts of Brazil. You can easily recognize them because they're white, because most people in Brazil are kind of the copper colored, as they're called, mixtures of Europeans and Indians, or Indians and Africans, because there's also quite some Afro Brazilians living in the Amazon. In Brazil, most of the African Brazilians live on the northeast, but during slavery, and actually what few people know, there are more, in times of slavery, there were about 10 million African slaves from Africa to the New World. There were actually more slaves were brought to Brazil than to North America. And so the Afro-Brazilians mostly live in the northeast, but already during slavery, people fled, and one of the destinations where they went to was the Amazon, which you can hide and form communities. So there are a lot of African communities live in the Amazon rainforest. And in the 19th century, there was a big, just after independence, was 1821. In the 1930s, there was a big uprising, and the rebels, slaves, ex-slaves, or poor people, they occupied Berlin, which is the biggest harbor at the river mouth. They occupied Berlin for a year. And then actually British troops helped the new federal government to, they blocked the city, the British Navy blocked the city. And then the federal troops of Brazil managed to reconquer the city, and then all the rebels, they fled into the Amazon, all over the place. So you have, and also along this river, this bay here a lot, which is a beautiful river. It's a clear water river, so blue water and white beaches. So here you find a lot of Afro Brazilian communities in the rainforest, along the riverbanks. So this has has formed a mixed population of Indians and Africans, or Indians and Europeans, or well, or with everything. And now you have these farmers from the south that are white. They have German names, and of course they're very easily recognizable. Sometimes if you go to this is the farmer association, and you see all these German names, and you know, okay, these are the soy farmers from the south that have moved in recently. And you can see it in the in the city here. These white Brazilians from the south that moved here. Now this is a soy field, so this is a new cause of deforestation, and obviously the deforestation of cattle, deforestation for soy, and deforestation for logs, for timber, is very much related. They work together, because of course before a farmer deforests everything, he works with a timber trader and to sell all the, especially the expensive wood. And then, so this is the normal process, they take all the expensive wood, sell it, export it, and then at the end of the dry season they put it to fire. If you travel in the Amazon, and you can see the forest fires every year September, when the forest is dry, you can only do this in September, farmers put forest to fire, and it's, well, you can see it, it's forest fires, you can see them from far. And sometimes it's first cattle, but then because soy prices have been rising, then some farmers said, okay, well, let's put soy here, it's more profitable. And so this is in the Santarém area where I work. So this is very recent deforestation. You can see the rainforest here, being deforested for soy. Most of this deforestation is illegal. Generally between 60 and 80% of all deforestation is illegal. So for the cattle and for the soy, or for the timber. And well, yes, people get away with this, or companies get away with this, because there's not much control. The governmental presence in these remote areas is very low, and especially in this state, which was already the state of conflict, known for its high level of corruption and violence. It's well, it's kind of easy to do. Soy fields. Now, in this, for example, this was a forest community until a few years ago, and now there's a farmer who has this forest and everything. And out of respect, he has lived the little cemetery of the forest community, but it's all that's left. So it's also a kind of a human tragedy. You know, all these forest communities are disappearing very rapidly. People end up in the cities, and you know, the girls are prostituting themselves, the guys maybe drug dealing or smoking coke pasta, which is very cheap. Which I never realized. My old theme was drugs. There's a lot of cocaine in the Amazon because it's the back door of Brazil, of Colombia. Now the back door, and I've studied quite a lot the cocaine business also in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean they have the British Marines, the American Marines, the Dutch Marine, and the French. They're patrolling with boats and helicopters or planes looking for cocaine smugglers. But the smart way to do it is through the back door and through the Amazon. And I've heard of timber traders and also of policemen that they're using submarines in the Amazon. They're using submarines in the Caribbean, in the Pacific. That's known. Many times police found submarines. Sometimes professional, sometimes fiberglass, kind of primitive, but still with a few tons of cocaine. But they also go through the Amazon, and the Amazon is muddy brown most of the time, so it's not so easy to spot from the air like in the Caribbean Sea. And so they're also using U-boats, for example, from Colombia to Manaus. And Manaus has a big container harbor, and from Manaus they can go directly to Africa or wherever. So I thought, wow. And so even in small villages or in communities, you find it's quite easy to simply. There's cocaine on the market, and it's very cheap. So it's leading to the problems of small communities disappearing, ending up in the city, and well, not really knowing this city life. And of course, they need. It's expensive to live in the city. Now, I want to show you a few pictures of a community, or this is the area around a small indigenous community where I do research, and it's surrounded by soy fields. And this is very recent, just last 3-4 years. This was forest until a few years ago. Farmers have moved in, soy farmers, and actually you can see it a little bit from this picture. This is a little bit higher. and the villages are here, and in the rainy season, and of course it can rain substantially in the Amazon, and it takes all and they're using a lot of pesticides for soy. So it's, and then all the water flows into the streams of the villages, and the villages complain a lot about the polluted water. Of course, because they don't have taps, they have to drink from the water, from the streams, from the sources, and they say it gets polluted. It's one of the things. We have a project, research project, funded by the Netherlands Research Council, Scientific Research Council, and we work with NGOs, and we have an interdisciplinary team also working with biologists. And one of the things we do is we're going to test the water quality in some of these villages, because that's their main concern. They have other concerns too. I mean, they don't have a place to hunt anymore. There's not much forest. It's hotter, they say, because of, well, when there's much forest, it cools. It cools, you know, the humidity in the forest. And when the forest is gone, they say it will become much hotter. Okay, but the main problem they have is the water in the streams. Well, I mean, okay. So this is in this village. This is one of the 3 water sources where people get their drinking water. Now it looks idyllic. You think, okay, nice community, amazing to live here, to get your water here. But it's only 50 meters. Goes up here, there's soy fields, and then the soy field as far as you can see. So it's really, it has become a little rainforest island within an enclave, within large areas of soy fields. And people have a lot of problems with these farmers. You know, if we talk here from a European perspective, you think, okay, a farmer is, okay, the guy's doing farming, normal guy. But if you talk about a farmer in Brazil, then you're more likely to talk about somebody with his private jet. You know, he's a large landowner, rich, and likely to use violence, or to have people, gunmen, pistoleros, using violence. The same with logging. If somebody's in the timber business, if you're in the Brazilian Amazon, if somebody in the timber business, it's like kind of, it's a kind of a dirty business, very violent business. And so from these people, for example, going to this village, we can only, if it's raining, it has rained a lot, we cannot go, we have to go with 4-wheel drive to the village. And then we have to pass by a few farms. And then some people from the community are afraid. They say, oh yeah, that farmer, he has a big rifle, he's threatening people. So this is the situation, you know, it's a tense relationship between these forest communities and the farmers who are new and who are willing to use violence, or at least have this reputation of willing to use violence. Now this is where it all started with. The Cargill installed a export harbor, and this is the river, the Tapajós River, a clear water river, beautiful river, well, here you can see it, the harbor. And every day you can see huge ships, mainly from Asia and Europe, loading soy. And so this is soy either from the south, from the other state, or from this area. And this harbor, by Cargill, was built without a permit. So in Brazil there have been court cases for over 10 years just about the very presence of this harbor. They never did an environmental impact study, which they have to do, because the federal law obliges that every company has to do an environmental impact study. They didn't. NGOs people from NGOs I spoke to, they said yes, probably they bribed people. Now, in the Routledge International Handbook of Criminology, something that came out a few months ago, some of you know it, I think. I published a chapter and discussing this soy issue and the involvement of Cargill. It's also something that I want to put here for the discussion, because I find it was really difficult for me to write about this company. This is the biggest private US company. It's a family company, but I think they have a turnover of over $300 billion. It's the soy giant in the world. They have an interesting, we all buy from Cargill, but I'm sure some of you, not everybody knows Cargill. It's part of the strategy of Cargill to stay behind a little bit, to not be very known. They have, if you look on the websites, and they say they have a really strong ethical standard. They all respect all laws. in the countries they work in, and all their partners, they only work with partners who also abide with the law. But then I go to the Amazon, and I see Cargill that has built this harbor 10 years ago without any permit. It's 10 years of court cases over just the construction of the harbor. It depends on the judge. Some judges condemned the harbor, they said you have to stop, but then the harbor was actually already there. And then another judge said no, so this is already unclear, the different judgments by different judges. It was just a few months ago that they finally got a permit by the Minister of Agriculture. It's already kind of unclear why now they suddenly got the permit. There's many rumors that they bought it, which in this part of Brazil would be not surprisingly. But for me as a researcher, it's quite difficult to write about this because, and so this is a discussion point. I noticed that it's really difficult, to write with a powerful multinational because they can maybe bring me to court. That's a risk. They're not willing to talk really, and they're very suspicious of researchers, NGOs. Well, and it's I think colleagues who worked on corporate crime, they may be more familiar with this. I used to do interviews with drug dealers and all that, and then it's clear that they're doing illegal things. So I don't have to know their name, but I just want to know about their business. Now, if you were talking with a legal player, they're very much concerned about the image and the name, and if they don't like it, they might bring you to court. And so this was a serious issue for me, so how to write this. It's very difficult to write real evidence. Okay, I'm not a policeman or something, so, but it's something that's worrisome to writing. Everybody knows Cargill, and Cargill says, no, but we're just buying it. We just buy soy. We're not planting soy, but at the same time, Cargill is also like a bank giving loans to farmers who want to start large farms there. So, and they have very good connections with politicians. Just a little bit the US system, that companies can support political parties, which they do. So what do you get in return? Now they just have this, it was just legalized, the harbor, they got the permit. And now another soy giant, because there are actually 4 big soy companies in Brazil, they also want to build an export harbor now. So at this moment there's still a lot of forest, but the pressure on the forest will only increase, and this is a very special part of the Amazon with high biodiversity. Wallace, actually, the British researcher, friend of Darwin, he lived in Santarém as well, and doing research here and on monkeys. Well, and this is the same river. This is when I lived there, this is the beach I always like to go to, as you understand. And this is a clear water river, blue water, white beaches. It's really very pleasant, and it's very small scale tourism. But the soy, now it's beautiful. The soy, and after the rain, because there's so much soy, this has become a soy producing region now. And they're using more and more pesticides. For soy, you need a lot of pesticides, and actually increasing quantities of pesticides. So after the rainy season, you can see this, and then because of the rainy season, all the pesticides flow into the river, and creates to algae. And this is the same river. It's me, just a little bit further downstream. And after the rainy season, it regularly turns totally green and very well. And this has to do. There's no industry. And there's only agriculture, so it's clearly related to the agriculture, probably to the pesticides. And so this is just one direct environmental impact of the monoculture of soy in this region. Besides let's say the social impact, the violence, the communities that have to leave or that are leaving, conflicts, and a lot of violent conflicts between forest communities and farmers. The project we have, we're trying to reduce some of these conflicts. So we work with, for example, with the prosecutor's office, the federal prosecutor's office. In Brazil, generally, at the state level, there's a lot of corruption, but at the federal level, there's not. So we work with the federal prosecutor's office, trying to, well, that laws are being respected, and for example, these communities where we go to, they are indigenous communities, but they don't exist. They are not recognized as, actually a lot of the problem with a lot of these communities is that they don't exist officially. They live there for maybe 300 years, but they've never registered. I mean, they live there for I don't know how many generations. So for the federal state, they don't always exist. On some maps of the government, these villages don't exist. And then sometimes this makes it easier sometimes for a farmer to get a concession for a land because it's uninhabited. So the struggle very often for villages, and an NGO which we work with, he helps these villages to be formally recognized. That the government recognizes that there is a village. And then, well, and then it sometimes complicates further. Then the villages has to say what kind of, if there are Afro-Brazilian or if they're indigenous, because if you, then the different policies apply to if they're indigenous or if they're Afro-Colombian. And this also leads sometimes to conflict because people are mixed. And so sometimes they have, because of in order for a certain policy to apply, they have to decide if they're indigenous or Afro-Brazilian. But sometimes this is really hard to say. Even within families, this sometimes creates a problem because then they have to be something in order to apply for a certain policy. It's really strange, but it's the reality. Maybe back to timber a little bit, because this Santarém, this city, is also a big timber export harbor, and in March we will have a new policy in Europe that importers have to show that all the timber is legal, and it's great. Up till a few years ago, about half of all the tropical timber was illegal. Now companies have to show my timber is legal. At the same time, it's an improvement that it has to be legal. I've always been a little bit critical because I'm worried about the enforcement. How are we going to enforce this? How it's really legal? And for example, in Santarém, which is again a big export harbor, I interviewed a timber trader, and he explained me in detail how it works. He's no longer in the timber business. He said there's 4 inspectors basically for the timber business in this harbor, and all 4 are corrupt. They make their round every year. They go to all the companies for Christmas, for Easter, and then the companies have to pay. And all 4 of them are corrupt, and they're the ones giving the permits for legality basically. So now, what happens? How do we do this in Europe when we import timber from the Brazilian Amazon? It has all the stamps, the federal stamps, and it looks well on paper. So that's maybe it's a bit my concern. Maybe it's an interesting point for the discussion too, because we were talking a little about the European policies for timber. There's also the European Roundtable on Responsible Soy now. And when I speak to people from this platform and this organization, we have now a good system in place that there is no more deforestation for soy. So wow, I don't know. Because in the part of the Amazon where I work, there's still deforestation for soy. But now actually in Brussels, there is no more deforestation, new deforestation for soy. It's being regulated now, responsible soy. But you see the export harbor, how do we know exactly where it comes from? It's coming from all directions, all the soy. And so I think it's good that we have new policies. Of course we should have this policy. Responsible soy, legal timber, or preferably sustainable timber. But the control systems are not yet in place, I think, to really check this, where soy comes from or where timber comes from. So that's definitely something we have to work on. Now, and another thing, so that might be an interesting point for discussion. Another one, I think, is the how do you deal with this with some powerful multinationals if you're writing about it? For example, another issue that I've studied a little bit, but not in depth, is that there is another multinational just not far from here. It's 5 hours by boat. There's Alcoa, is an aluminum company from the United States, is deforesting for aluminium, bauxite. And the bauxite is at 12 meters deep under the rainforests, and so they're deforesting everything, selling the timber, of course. And so I didn't show them yet, but I've photos of piles of huge trees of hundreds of years old, being deforested by the Alcoa company because they want to get the bauxite. Alcoa did an environment impact study. They have a permit from the federal government, so that's legal. But then in the environmental impact study, in the first one, they forgot to mention the 9,000 forest people who live in the area, in the affected area, who's going to be deforested. I met these people from these communities, and of course they're very upset. They said, we were not mentioned, we don't even exist. Alcoa is paying some compensation out to these communities, so it has calmed down a little bit, but still people are very worried because they've all these trees of 100 years of medicinal trees, food trees, water is being polluted, so in a large area people are very much worried about what Alcoa is doing. But maybe also a question to some of the colleagues, how do you deal with it, or how can it be, I feel that I find it difficult to write about these companies, basically because I'm a little bit afraid that they will sue me or something, or bring me to court because I'm writing bad about them. So it's, I'd like to know some other experience of people, maybe if you have, how, or advice basically, how you deal with it. Because I know sometimes I feel limited in publishing what I want to publish out of fear for legal consequences. And I know in the Netherlands there was a colleague from Rotterdam University. He was brought to court, and then the university didn't back him up. He had to, he was on himself. So it's not a very promising situation. So that may be for the discussion. And otherwise, I'm open to any questions or clarifications.
Sorry.
Yes.
No, coffee, the coffee industry, often mentioned in deforestation as well. Much experience of that?
Well, it's not in this part.
No.
I think Brazil is a big coffee producer, of course.
Indonesian.
Yes. And well, in with coffee, and then in Indonesia, I showed you a picture of timber, but Indonesia, the equivalent of soy and cattle in Brazil, in Indonesia, it's palm oil.
Oh.
And palm oil is everywhere. It's Unilever is the big company, and Unilever the same. I've been in a meeting with somebody from Unilever. Oh no, everything is also responsible soy and this and that, sustainable. But it's huge areas are being deforested for the palm oil, and it's all in food, in chips, and all that has all this. It says vegetable oil, palm oil. It's huge deforestation for. But coffee, yes, Indonesia probably. But no, I never studied coffee.
Drank.
Yeah. Well, another thing, maybe it's the safety is an issue as well. In all these going to these areas, especially the governmental presence is low. And in the city where I've been living in Santarém, it's okay. There are the government functions. There's police. But if you leave the city, then it's basically the landowners and the loggers who control, who rule the place. And with their gunmen, people generally, if you're for it, people are armed. That's quite normal, also against dangerous animals. So it's very, of course, with a machete, but sometimes with a gun or a rifle. They don't like it so much, especially if you're a foreigner, that looking, spying. So safety is an issue, and I've been keeping a little bit kind of low profile, but I thought, okay, what would happen if I would be outspoken, just like if some of these environment protectors, then you receive death threats, it's quite common. And so many people have been killed. So it's, I don't, I liked spending time there, but it's also, I'm also happy being back here, It's just, you don't have the safety issues anymore. And also I'm a father of small children now, and do I want to keep on doing these dangerous or potentially dangerous things? Having conflict with farmers and all that, and so which I'd never expected, because I've been in many, I've done research in the ghettos of Kingston, Jamaica. I met some of these gangsters and dons. I've been sometimes in dangerous situations when there was shootouts and all, had to run. But actually, this is, I feel more unsafe doing this research, but I'd never expected. I have to, let's say, watch my back more doing this research than when I was interviewing drug dealers and going into urban ghettos. Timber and deforestation issues. So, and the profits, yes, there's so much money involved. And so they don't like it when people are looking at this. And well, the good thing is that they used to mostly threaten and kill environmental human rights protectors. Now they bring them to court. This is a new development, that the criminalization of social movements and of the criminalization of protests. And for example, in this area there is a big timber company and that has a lot of conflict with indigenous communities for illegal logging. And it's a big, very known timber company. And to my big surprise, they got an FSC certification a few months ago. FSC is the best certification system for timber. And to my big surprise, they got an FSC certification. Because normally, when you have a lot of conflict with forest communities, you're not supposed to get the FSC certification. But they got it. And then we work with an NGO, I mentioned it before, the Pastoral Land Commission, that helps forest communities in their land conflicts. Very respectable NGO, you can compare it to Amnesty International or something, kind of human rights approach. And there was forest communities were they had a camp stopping big transports of illegal logs. They stopped them and they asked for the government to come. They wanted the government, please come. This is illegal timber. We are blocking it now on the river until you come. The government didn't come. And after a month, a blockade after a month, of course, this has a huge impact. People all have to come from different villages and to have this blockade. They put it to fire. They put the logs to fire. The company was angry and they started court cases to several community leaders from indigenous communities and also some of the NGOs that were present. They were also brought to court. And so one of our colleagues is now facing criminal procedures because of this timber company. The timber company that just got an FSC certification. So this is a new development, the criminalization of social movement as a way to suppress protest. And it's something we will start a research on this, the decriminalization, because it's happening in a lot of places that social movement or environmental activists, human rights activists are being criminalized by the government or by companies. So I think it's interesting also for criminologists. We always study criminalization, which we study other types of criminalization, but here the criminalization is always kind of political almost. So it's I think it's interesting for criminologists to study this type of criminalization. Are there any further questions or discussion points?
Okay, well mine was kind of looking at almost the reverse of that with these new EU laws and stuff, what's the potential for prosecuting these big firms in European or international court?
Yes, well and
how do you gather evidence on the ground and prove that it's valid for like a European Union court and prosecuting them rather than potentially more corrupt or effective courts?
Well, this is very exciting now with the law and foreign liability cases. There was just a court case against Shell just a few weeks ago in the Netherlands.
But didn't they get off most of those?
Most of it, yes. Most of it, yes. We're going to we have this project, a research project, and we're going to extend it a little bit, and exactly adding the legal dimensions. And my law school, there is somebody who's going to join our team. She's specialized in these corporate liability cases. She knows everything about all these court procedures. So there's hard law and there's soft law. And it's like the Ruggie framework, the UN Ruggie framework, which obliges multinationals and states to respect human rights, but also environmental standards. So there is it's developing a legal framework, hard law and soft law, to giving tools to start cases against multinationals. And I think so it's becoming easier. It's also a little bit difficult. I've sometimes give courses to the prosecutor's office, and then they say, "Wow, I mean, a lot of this deforestation for soy is illegal, but it's difficult to find. Okay, to say this soy has been grown on illegal illegally deforested land because it's coming from all over. But then they said, somebody working for the prosecutor's office said, well, Tim, we were quite activist. Because the destination is Holland, it's one of the main destinations. So then there's actually illegal soy kind of arriving in the Netherlands. But I think it's quite difficult to prove that. I mean, it's complicated. The same with the meat. It's interesting. There's the prosecutor in Belém, the city, has started a campaign. It's called Legal Meat, carne legal, because most of deforestation is for cattle. So there's a lot of illegal cattle, basically, or illegally forested, or they're grazing there illegally. And Greenpeace Brazil had a really good report 2 years ago. It's called Slaughtering the Amazon on the meat business, all the illegal meat basically, and also the leather. Brazil is, because it is the biggest beef producer, it's also the biggest leather exporter. There's a lot of this leather is actually illegal, be exported worldwide to China, to Europe, and they identified big brands buying illegal leather from Brazil. So then you have the different criminological strategies. Do we want naming and shaming, or do we want court cases? But I find it also, as a researcher, I study this, but then, okay, should I now go report them? It's not really my function, I think, as a researcher. But it's also a dilemma, I'm not a policeman or something, but okay. So I write about it, but sometimes I said, okay, I discovered this about this timber company I just mentioned. I mentioned this to somebody. He said, yeah, but you should report it. I said, I don't know. Is this my task to report this? I'm not sure. Yes?
Sorry, it's the court thing. That courts very rarely actually get you what you want in this sort of naming and shaming. It looks quite nice, but essentially a court is never going to be able to award you that which you need. But almost a better model and what regulatory frameworks give you is the sort of graduated ability to check licensing. So Gibson Guitar is as a wood one, but they now are having to individually authorise any shipment that they have. The actual cost of that on any large importer is incredible. But you have to certify individually the provenance of the thing which is being imported. So the way of getting your protection can be having almost a good and a bad list, or a good and a bit dodgy list of people who are importing into a common market, into the EU. And so the job I'd suggest of things like campaigners is actually to show how people should be allocated to those two different lists, and whether they should be in the nice list or the nasty list. And that kind of gets you a lot more than you're ever going to get through an individual court action, would be my suggestion.
Yes?
On how to publish stuff, particularly when corporations don't want you to, there's a UK charity called Sense About Science that campaigns around this, particularly in respect of scientific, and particularly campaigns around the use of defamation. How dare you say these bad things about our products? So there might be some commonality there. And obviously, even here, we have environmental protesters being targeted by the energy companies, so you don't even have to be in the developing world to find yourself coming under surveillance and legal attack. So there's connections all around.
Right. No, but for example, there was a hearing in a court in a small town in the Amazon, and then you see the power of this multinational. I mean, they fly in with all the top people from Sao Paulo, which is 4,000 kilometers, and with the teams of lawyers, and then you're there as this small researcher. They say, wow, they have this, and money is no problem, of course. I mean,
I was just going to say, in the case of the EU timber regulation that comes in March, so like 3 weeks, the burden of proof is actually on the importer. So if they're found to be importing illegally sourced or illegally logged timber products, then they will be the ones who can be prosecuted for that.
What's like the burden of proof there?
They basically have to prove that they have a system of due diligence, that they have exercised due diligence in sourcing the timber, and what exactly the punishment for that is still being ironed out.
Yeah,
at the
because
moment.
that's always, is it a criminal or a civil?
It will be a criminal offence. Yeah. But I think it was very recently, within the past 2 weeks in the UK, they've been talking about what kind of options are going to be available in terms of, actually pursuing this, and what kind of fines, what would it be if it's a magistrate's court, if it can possibly be subject to going to...
I mean, I'm not an expert on it, far from it, but it often seems that if you fine a company,
Yeah.
it doesn't have that big a difference because it's just kind of a cut of, let's say that was £300 billion or whatever. Whereas if you can target criminal, as in jail terms, against individuals quite hard,
Yeah.
you get that. But I mean, they've talked about it with the NHS, haven't they, that managers are so cut off from actual responsibility that the standards are very poor. So kind of trying to bring that principle into these projects and make people even with big lawyer teams.
I think under what was being discussed with how the UK is going to implement the European Union timber regulation, it was being said that you can put director of the company basically responsible for that. But of course it depends if it goes to magistrates court. I think until there was a threshold of how much should be fined, and that is being reviewed at the moment. It hasn't actually been implemented yet to remove that upper threshold. But if it goes to different court, then you can actually get fined or sent to prison. So there was a kind of a consultation process around it very recently on what would be the best way of enforcing it and being able to prosecute it.
Yeah, this is very interesting with the timber. Starting in March, that companies have to prove it's legal. At the same time, it says something about the business that some people, let's say the bureaucrats, are so happy about this that yes, we've managed to decide now to define now that the timber has to be legal. Shouldn't it be legal in the first place, But okay, it was necessary because there was so much illegal timber, especially from tropical countries. Not only, because also Siberia, for example. EIA had this research on Siberia and with the North American. Marketing for you, No, but I mean the EIA, because it's mostly NGOs, it should be said, that have put this on their agenda. Talking about illegal timber, like I told you in the beginning, how colleagues and students reacted to, is this crime? Yes, it is. A lot of it is crime. And it's actually, NGOs put this on their agenda. And I think I'm one of the few academics who started studying it as well, but it's really, the groundwork has been done by NGOs like EIA, and they have been doing excellent studies. And for example, what I was fascinated, there was in the New Yorker a bit of article on this, in Siberia, which is the largest forest on the planet, is Siberia, and all this illegal logging in Siberia. Where does it go to? It all goes to China. And China is of course the factory of the world, we all buy, and then so they went into the Walmart in the United States, and they're like for the toilet or baby cribs and all these wood, where does it officially from China, but it's not Chinese, it's coming from Siberia. And I mean, this was, I don't know, multi-billion-dollar business of all these timber from Siberia with the train to China, and there it's processed and exported worldwide. And so, okay, at least now there's this legality standard in the European Union. I mean, this is the evolution of our norms, okay, but it's interesting how it will work right now. There will be some interesting things. Now there will be supervising bodies that will supervise the timber importing companies. Now the Dutch Timber Trade Association wants to be one of the supervising bodies, which I think is a conflict of interest and makes me a little bit suspicious, because they have excellent public relations policies, and they say, oh, all our members, always legal, as much as possible sustainable, that's what they say and promote. But then the chairman of this Timber Trade Association, one of the timber species that he imports is teak. And teak timber is very interesting, Because teak timber, and in the Netherlands, especially in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands is specialized in building yachts. Steve Jobs' yacht, he died, but his yacht is there, and he had it, so a lot of millionaires, billionaires have their yachts constructed in the Netherlands. Everybody wants teak timber on the deck. Why? Teak is, you don't have to paint it, whatever, it's resistant to fresh and salt water, and it's beautiful. And but you want the teak from Burma, from not planted. You don't want, you have in Costa Rica, you have some plantations of teak, but these are, let's say, small trees, and they don't have the same amount of oil in it. But from Burma, it's in the rainforest, so big trees of 100 years old or something, and they have a higher oil level, which makes them better resistant against different salt water, and everybody wants this. But then a few years we had an embargo, because after the junta, the military junta, the violent reaction to the Buddhist protests, and then the EU installed an embargo, also against timber. So, and I thought, this is interesting. What happens to all these teak here on the Dutch market? So a year after the embargo, I sent some students to shops. I said, there is an embargo since a year, so I'm curious to see if there's a lot of teak. Teak all over the place. You can still find teak everywhere. And he, the chairman of the Dutch Timber Trade, is one of the 3 big importers. I sent students to him, and he was bragging about how he legally managed to still import basically from Burma, but then because it's sawn in Thailand, according to the European regulations or something, rule, it's Thai and it's not Burmese. And so there still is all, I think it has been lifted now, right? Maybe the sanctions now.
They've been, what's the terminology? They've been suspended, but they haven't gone away,
Okay.
basically,
Mm.
so it could always come back. They haven't actually been completely lifted.
Yes. But anyway, this was the chairman of the Dutch Timber Trade Organization. He's finding ways to still import this very profitable or this special timber that's so much in demand, because it's still on the market, and the yachts still are being constructed with teak from Burma. And then I investigated, actually, okay, there's this European embargo. Is somebody actually controlling this? Not really. I mean, it's with a lot of phone calls. Is everyone looking at this? If the embargo? Not really. And then it's already quickly complicated. Okay, now we have this new policy on timber, so I'm very curious about it. Also a little bit doubtful about the effect, if it really works. Who's going to check the Brazilian stamps, or the stamps from the Democratic Republic of Congo, or if it's but it's maybe also something for the discussion. But it's something I think it's interesting also for green criminologists. I mean, there is a stricter policy now, and I think we can also contribute to making it better. Yes.
I'm really interested in the impact of illegal logging on the local community. And do you think